Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be just. I'm watching. Hey, what's in that cheek? I'm no qua, what's in that cheek? One lemon,
Okay, please, sir, 11 already. Please, can we all sit there, please? Because we will give extra time. All our time management preparation. Please.
Bom, quando isso foi de lembro. E quando
Hello. All right. Well, I say good morning from here. This is 4 a.m. here. So I want to say good morning to you all. I don't know if Dr. Oriola and other panelists are ready. So I want to say, once again, welcome to the panel. The title of the panel is Gendered Identities, Social Narratives, Body Politics, and Agency of Women in Contemporary Nollywood Films. The idea that this panel is trying to talk about is the understanding that identity has always been a recurring theme in African cinema, from the movies of Usman Sembène to that of Tunde Kelani and the neo cineasts who are just, beginning to make movies about women and talking more about issues of identity. So within different ways of looking at representation in African cinema. So what this panel is aiming to, to get at is the understanding that when we look at ways of identifying, or when we think through cinema of identity, or when we talk about the concept of, framing
So there seems to be a kind of, when you look at it, difference or multiple differences in the ways women filmmakers and male filmmakers in which they represent, topics on sexuality, on gender, and also agency. So what we are trying to do here is, in a way, to think through, in this case, what gender identity, what it explores by thinking through the exploration of nuanced narratives that impose phallocentric ideologies on women. And then we are thinking, in this case, gender identities that explores the nuances of multiple subject positioning in contemporary Nollywood films. Therefore, this panel's goal, one of the main goals, is to focus on how Nollywood filmmakers depict the diversity of identities that form, explain, project, and defend various iterations of African womanhood. Beyond the cliched and institutions of representations in simplistic representation of women are strong, resourceful, energetic, and custodians of cultural institutions of their society, or as helpless, domesticated victims of hegemonic powers. This panel invites, engagement and scholars whose works examine, explain, theorize, and complicate the overlapping performances of gender, nationality, class, ethnicity, sexuality, agency, traditional rights, cultural expectations, and modernity that contribute to the subjugation of women and suppression of their multiple identities in new Nollywood films or in contemporary African cinema. So today, we are expecting about 5 panelists to be here today. So we have Policing Sex, Liminal Space, Sexuality, and Feminine Agency in Kunle Afolayan's film, which is to be given by Afolakemi Oladipupo from University of Ibadan. We are also exploring, going to be talking about exploring gender boundaries, body politics, and women's struggle in Genevieve Energies Lionheart by Goodness Agada. So if they are all here, they'll be talking to these topics. Then we have representation on metapragmatic representations of barrenness as witchcraft in Kunle Afolayan's Anikulapo by Titilope Oriola from Adekunle Ajasin University. I can see Dr. Oriola here. You are welcome, Dr. Oriola. We also have Womanism and Beautification of Single Motherhood in Biodun Stevens' Sister and Big Love by Joseph Dami, Bayero University. Then lastly, we have Language and the Negotiation of Feminine Identities in Nollywood Films, a pragma socio-linguistic analysis of Kemi Adetiba's King of Boys and Return of the King by Senab Bolanle Raji Elia, Bayero University. On that note, I'd like to welcome our presenters if they are here. My goal is to facilitate this session. So if the presenters are here, they'll be presenting, but if not, so we are just going to go by the available presenter. And on that note, I can only see Dr. Oriola Titilope here. Possibly others will join us before the end of this session, but if not, so we make this a very engaging panel, whereby we are going to have a robust discussion on the idea of identity, gender, sexuality, and agency of women in Nollywood films. So please welcome with me, Dr. Oriola Titilope. Dr. Oriola Titilope, she is a PhD and she is an assistant, correct me if I'm wrong, she is a senior lecturer at Adekunle Ajasin University. She teaches English and global literature. Please welcome Dr. Oriola Titilope.
Okay, good morning. Welcome to the session on gender identities, sexual narratives, body politics, and agency in contemporary Nollywood films. As introduced, I'm Dr. Titilope Oriola. My paper is titled Metapragmatic Representation of Barrenness as Witchcraft in Kunle Afolayan's Anikulapo. Anikulapo is a 2-sequel movie, Anikulapo and the Rise of the Spectre. Okay, I'm going to quickly give you the synopsis of both before I continue. Anikulapo describes a young lady who was loved by the husband. And because of this, of course, loved by the king of a particular community, that's your community, which was a very big one at that time. And because of the love of the husband, the other wives were jealous, and of course they were angry. One thing that was particular was that she was barren. And of course, it gave the other women avenue to abuse her. The first sequel actually explained marriage, then you are a witch. That is about the first movie about a woman who didn't have a child, and so the other wives had reasons to abuse her as barren. And of course, at some point, she had to agree that even if she was to be a witch, that she would use her power for something better. At that point, she was trying to deny the fact that she could be a witch. But in the second sequel of Anikulapo, that is the Rise of the Spectre, the simple lady who was presented as a run character by Kunle Afolayan was actually endowed by witchcraft. It was a natural endowment by the society or by nature itself, to show that witchcraft is not something that witchcraft could be endowed by nature itself, rather. Okay, going by this, I'm going to explain what actually motivates this work. A work by Shoeton 2002, where he explained Ajaism and Oshorunga. He explained Oshorunga as a way, or as an archaic way of people looking at witches, where witches are women predominantly, where witches are bloodsuckers, where witches are bad, and of course, social outcasts. But he then looked at Ajaism. That Ajaism is like trying to resituate the culture of witchcraft, where it connotes motherhood, it connotes positivity, and that is Ajaism. And that if you look at both well, that the construction of the society or the patriarchal society construction of witchcraft as Ajaism is incorrect. And that is where this work finds us, or where it's situated. Okay, practically, I'm going to be using Ballet's cultural pragmatics. Cultural pragmatics explains that everything you say, everything you do may have different meanings in different societies. And of course, I'm going to explain witchcraft according to the African concept. But before I do this, I'm going to situate the Western culture or the cultural relativism of witchcraft in the Western world, where Switzerland, 1978, explains witchcraft in 4 dimensions. At first, she explained that witchcraft could be a wave that people just have the notion that some people are bad without tracking them to any form of negativity. You just feel that these people are not, they're not agreeing to what people say. You're trying to break free. You're trying to go beyond your limitations in the society. You're trying to change your identity. And then Switzerland identifies this people or this set of women as witches. And again, the second wave, women that were rebelling against the customs of the society, they were also assumed to be witches. The third wave was that these women were actually behaving like witches. No, at first, they were not behaving like witches. People just thought they were witches. But when it got to the third wave, they became witches because they started behaving. They started displaying the characters of witches, and so they became witches. And the fourth strand looked at witchcraft according to feminism, that there is a male gaze that explains womanhood, or that explains a womanhood as evil, a woman who would be uncouth, a woman who would not listen to the husband, a woman who would want to behave like a man is a witch. And that is the identification of Switzerland when it comes to witchcraft. And okay, I'm going to explain cultural pragmatics. I'm going to explain Anikulapo using cultural pragmatics. I said earlier that my title is metapragmatic representation of barrenness as witchcraft. So particularly, I'm going to be explaining the metaphor of witchcraft. Okay, the metaphoric representation of witchcraft is that when you're a witch, according to Shoeton 2002 and the Nollywood tradition of Ajileye, where you have Kotoru and other movies, witchcraft has to do with women, or people who practice witchcraft are particularly women or few men oh, these women are bad, they are bloodsuckers. That's the concept of witchcraft in Nigeria's movie. But Shuaito made it work by differentiating witchcraft and Ajaism and Ushirunga. And I'm going to be using Ajaism. And so that Ajaism is a positive way of connoting motherhood, connoting humaneness or humanity. Okay, I explained before now that Anikulapo is a story of a woman, Arolake, a round character who was married or who got married as a very young lady and then started developing. She didn't even know anything. She just realized she could not give birth to a child, and the co-wife started abusing her as barren. And at some point, the abusers got too much that she had to say, okay, even if she was to be a witch, that would she use her power to do what was not right? At that point, she was still the common woman who didn't have any power, but who was imposed, who had this imposition of witchcraft. Her identity was that of a witch because she was barren. And of course, there are some excerpts. I'm going to share my video. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I'm trying to do that, but I can continue. Okay, that the society was actually pointing fingers at her as a witch at first. And then she had to just agree that even if she was a witch, that she would have done better. But in the second sequel of the movie, nature actually endowed her with the power of witchcraft. She was just she was working and she got tired, so she sat under an igiose. I'm sorry, I've not been able to share the screen. I'm trying to do that. Okay. Okay, please, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, the first sequel explains the societal labeling of witchcraft. She wasn't a witch, but the society thought she was a witch because she was irresponsible, because she was unable to give birth. And because it was too much, the identification was too much, she didn't have a choice, and then she agreed that she was a witch. That was the first sequel. And at the end of the first sequel, as the person she wanted to elope with, Saro, she was in love with a particular man, Saro, and because of the frustration she had in the palace, she decided to elope with him. And of course, they heard about it, and then they beat Saro to death. As she was trying to bemoan the death of Saro, she saw a particular bird, a mystical bird, Akala. And then she was trying to chase the bird. And then she just realized that Saro was alive, and then she took, and there was a guard that the Akala bird was trying to use, so she stole it, and that was the end of the first sequel. Now, the second sequel started on that same place, on that same rock, and at this point, Arolaka was no longer the simple girl that she used to be. And then one day, like she started having issues in the second sequel, and then she was working, and then she slept under an ose tree. As she slept, it was natural that she just disappeared into the ose tree, and then she did a work for them, and then they blessed her with multiple wealth. Like, she was very affluent, she became very rich, and she didn't even know where she got the riches from. And when she got to a new society, people started celebrating her. She became influential, she became affluential, and then people were asking questions like, where did she come from? Where is her husband? Nobody knew her husband, but she was very rich. And then they were saying that she was a witch because she was too rich, nobody could trace her source. That was for them, that was witchcraft. So I'm going to be looking at the framing. I'm going to be looking at two framings of witchcraft. I'm going to be looking at the negative and the positive labeling of witchcraft before I situate the metaphor of witchcraft. Okay, I said two major framings of womanhood were portrayed in the movies. The positive and the negative labeling. Under the negative framing, women were portrayed as us. They were portrayed as witches, victims of infertility, subordinate to men. They are baby makers. While the movies positively frame women as solution givers, they are planners, they are protectors, they are kind and humane mothers. Okay, now when the society was actually labeling Arolake as a witch, as a whore, as a victim, the nature itself was actually endowing her with so much power to rule the cosmos. And the pouch that was given to her in her dream by the in the Ose tree, at some point there was this male-centric, there was this this chauvinistic character, Basharu, who wanted to rubbish her. Then, okay, at some point, Basharu wanted to collect the pouch from her. But from nowhere, people just came and attacked Basharu, and she was able to retrieve the pouch. Even without throwing any tantrums, without throwing any fist, nature was just fighting for her. And of course, by able to control the cosmos, by not even saying a word, she became a witch. Okay, now I'm going to quickly go to the framing of, okay, women as witch and all. The framing of women as witches and all is predominant in Anikulapo. The likes of Arolake and Nawaru are labeled as high-handed witches and us. Arolake, the main character, is portrayed as a witch because she has the heart of her husband, Alafin, who went as far as depriving other wives' sleep to satisfy her. Now, there's an excerpt, Queen Wojola, you miserable woman, witch, full of hate. Then Arolake said, I am not a witch, and even if I were, I would use my power for better things than luring some old man. Queen Wojola, we all have our uses here in the palace. For some of us, are you listening? We are to bear royal sons and daughters, but you have a different use. You are just the king's player. Oh yes, you are useful for nothing. Okay. Now look at it. That because she was barren, then she was a witch. Automatically, there's this metaphor of witchcraft that comes in, that what kind of woman would eat her own children? And that is the metaphor, that is the identity. And again, there's another character, the character of Awarun. Awarun left her marriage, and because she left her marriage, for the society, she is a witch. Because she was trying to do what other women would naturally not do. And because Awarun was a businesswoman, she was also very rich, and she could stand her ground. And then she was identified as a witch. She is a married woman, you know. Awarun has the form of a woman, but she is really a man. The woman you are involved with is a man-eater. She loves young, good-looking men like you. She sleeps with them and turns them, and okay, then say she sleeps with them and then turn them to useless men. So she was also referred to as a witch. That is women has any woman as a witch, or any woman who is high-handed was portrayed as witch. And again, we have women as victims of infertility. At some point, Sarah started acting up, despite the fact that she promised Arolake that she was going to stay with her forever. But when she realized that Arolake wasn't giving birth, he impregnated another woman. And for him to explain, he was still trying to say that Arolake caused him to sleep with another woman, trying to portray Arolake as a bad person, while he was the one that actually offended her. Sarah said, don't take this matter to heart. It is not a big deal. We ought to have discussed it. It is true. I impregnated Omowo. It is our child. Come to think of it, I still love you, but for how long will we remain like this without children? You also know that to build a strong household, we need to have children to establish this family, and so on. Now, this actually portrays women, like any women, as victims of infertility, that the woman was actually the one, that she was the cause of herself not giving birth, that he wasn't the one. Of course, that if he went out of the marriage to impregnate another woman, that the woman should even be grateful because he was indirectly giving her a child. Okay, I also have another framing, woman as idle and unproductive. Okay, and eventually when Arolake became very rich, the people in the neighboring society or in the neighboring communities, they were asking who is actually her husband, because they could not think of the fact that any woman who is not married would have so much wealth. And because of that, even Arolake would not want to be called a queen. Some of our slaves would want to refer to her as a queen, but she didn't want that kind of identity, because she knew that as a queen, she would have to be married to a king to be a queen. But she doesn't want to, or she didn't want to be referred to as a queen. Rather, she said that she should be referred to as Ololabirin, a rich woman or a wealthy woman. And so this was the kind of thing she wanted to be. And again, we have women as baby makers. Like, if you're not making a child, if you're not making a baby, then you're not a woman. That is the framing of womanhood in the movie. I have Princess Kikelomo, please go and call Queen Arolake for me. Then Queen Sukomi said, please sit down. Which Kikelomo should go and call Queen Arolake? Does my child look like a slave? If the hairdresser cannot go, and so said, okay, that you can send your own children, that she should go and make her own children so that she can send them on errands. Now, we should now look at the positive framing of womanhood as portrayed in the in the movie, that despite the fact that women who are barren are actually portrayed negatively, but that these women actually have so many things they're doing right. And that usually in the movie of Kunle Afolayan, that women, like especially the second sequel of the movie, it shows women as planners. That these women, despite the fact that the society has so labeled them negatively, they are good planners. Okay, the theme that frames women as planners are predominant in Anikulapo. Such characters as Awarun, Arolake, and Faderera, they helped the symbol of patriarchy, that is Saro, to reach its goal. At first, Saro met Awarun first, and then she was the one that helped Saro to set up his business. Of course, she helped him to set up a business. She gave him money. Of course, she gave him a job to work for her, and then she gave him money and then set up a company for her. Sorry, set up a company for him. Also, Arolake was the one that stole the guard from the Akala bird. It was something naturally that people would not want to do, but because she was courageous, and then she stole the Akala, she stole the guard, and later that guard was what they used in the Ojumo society to survive. Okay, I'm going to show you some of the clips. 1 minute, please. I'm going to show you. Yeah. When Saro was doubting, I was asking Arolake how they would survive. It was as if Arolake had seen the future, and she just told Saro not to bother, that things would just fall in place naturally. And it was funny how they became very rich. Okay, women are also solution givers. Afolayan framed women the Ifa divination actually said that only Arolake could carry a sacrifice that would atone for all the sins of the Oyo people. And of course, just naturally, Arolake just became a witch, a kind of a nature sense. And then despite the fact that she had slept with another man, and then she was labeled as a whore in the society, it was obvious that that culture or the god did not see her as or they still saw her as a symbol or an emblem of perfection. So they needed Arolake to carry a sacrifice. But the beauty of the thing was that a particular male-centric character in the movie, Bashorun, instead of seeing the same thing or saying the same thing the gods were saying, he decided to infuse his own anger, his own bias, because he had an age-long rivalry with the king. He wanted his son to marry the king's daughter. And because the king had refused to give a son the wife, he was almost always angry with him. And then he didn't want to have anything with him. And so when he heard that Arolake was going to be the one to carry the sacrifice that would atone for the society, he was angry. And instead of him supporting that ideology or supporting the ideology of the gods, he came in with his own ideology and said that Arolake was a witch and a whore, that why would the society or why would they celebrate a woman like that, that she should be killed instead. Okay, women are solution givers. There's this woman, Iyagba. Saro took the guard when he took the guard of the mystical Akala bird, he started raising the dead, and particularly he raised an old woman. The old woman actually was a witch and then knew so much. So when Saro came back as a Silute, it was only the old woman that saw him and then helped him to become a living being. It became Akudaya through the help of the woman. What other men could not do. Other men was just killing all of them because they could not see him, they were all blind. But only the old woman was able to see him because it was a different kind of person. She was an old person, but she was a solution giver as a woman. Okay, we also have women as humane and motherly. Despite the fact that Arolake was barren, at the end of the second sequel, even Saro identified her prowess as a mother. And at the last scene of Rise of the Spectre, before the last scene, Saro begged Arolake to help him take care of the baby. And at the last scene, the mother of the child was there. That was Fadewera. Awarun was there. That's the grandmother of the baby. And and Aralaketu was seated. And then the baby was handed over to her. She didn't have a child. She was barren, but she was identified as the mother of the child. And that is why I come to the concept of Ombi and Ongo. And for that kind of sin, or for that kind of thinking, despite the fact that she was barren or she didn't produce a child naturally, the movie portrayed her as the only person who was capable of taking care of the son. Because if you look at the two sequels very well, Sarah had given birth to several children. He had about 6. He had wives. He had about 4 wives who had children for him. But obviously, the children just disappeared. And then he said particularly that only Arolake could take care of the child well, to show that despite the fact that she was barren, she was a kind of witch who could take care of the child well. And in the Yoruba concept, you would have people eulogizing witches as Iya Miaje. Iya Miaje means my mother witch. My mother witch is, if you are a mother, then you are humane, then you are kind, and all the positive negotiations. And of course, women are also protectors. And if Arolake could be the only person capable of protecting that child, then she's a protector. Tapping into the spiritual manifestation of female power as a protection against hegemonic hostility and pretentious masking of male domination. Afolayon's The Rise of the Spectre creates the image of a gullible woman thrown about by the society. In Anikulapo, the Ifa divination proclaimed that she should be brought back. Okay, sorry, I've mentioned this before, but of course she was a protector. Okay, delving into the ideological underpinnings embedded in the traditional social belief that barren women in Africa are malicious, wicked, ruthless, unhappy. The data reveal that the social norms governing such beliefs are erroneous and detached from reality. With such theoretical frame as cultural pragmatics, the document evaluates the inclusion and exclusion roles of women responsibilization against irresponsibilization. The paper concludes that barren women over the years have become symbols of self-actualization, self-empowerment, and self-love, debunking barrenness as metaphor for witchcraft, as malicious, unfounded, and redundant. It argues that the negative witchcraft undertone, discernible in the text, are anchored in entrenched social and historical context rather than prescriptive mandate of social responsibilization. This shows that the identification of barren women as witches in the society, as portrayed by contemporary film writers, have shown that women, like barren women, are not what the society portrays them to be. They are not wicked. They're not witches. They're not oshoronga. They are not bloodsuckers. They are people who are able to take care of other people's children. That is Ongo. And that brings us to the end of the paper. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Please, let's appreciate that. Thank you so much, Dr. Oriola Titilope. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. So quickly, because there are just the 2 of us here, so I'm expecting other presenters. So, but before we open the session up for Q&A, quickly, let me summarize what you've given us today. So in your presentation, you talk about the concept of witchcraft, and then framing the concept using the trope of, adjacent. So as a, rhetorical frame or tool for talking about witchcraft, and in this case, within the concept of barrenness. So if a woman is barren, so the idea in most cases is that, so she's possibly also a witch, because it is expected that a married woman should give birth, and women who are unable to, in many instances, are regarded as being witches, because it could mean that they've used their own they've used their own unborn babies, so as a form of spiritual power exchange in the coven. So with you kind of allude to that cultural or probably social, social suggestions that are very rampant in many African societies, including the one, that is the background for the movies you kind of unpacked here today. So in your analysis, you talk about the concept of single mother and barrenness. So, and you kind of connect them together to show how being barren could sometimes be misinterpreted to mean that, oh, the woman is barren because she's a witch, and also being a single mother. So how that can also, especially a powerful and influential woman who is, who is married but divorced, but doing well for herself socially and also, financially, economically, and also who carries a power position, how such a person could be interpreted as a man-eater. And it's very interesting the way you use the term man-eater. So man-eater, which in a way could be synonymous with the idea of flesh-eating. Flesh-eating is a common ideology or part of the trope of, witchcraft, whereby people tend to think, or there are always these common ways of thinking through witchcraft or witches as people who gather in the, in their coven in the dark of the night to eat human flesh. So eating of human flesh and also man-eater, so both are kind of symbolic way of gesturing at, the idea of destruction. So which, is hinted at in the movie Anikulapo through the person of Awarun as a man-eater. That is a woman who consumes, men. So the art of eating here is a symbolic one that gestures towards this concept of witchcraft and, witchcraft practices. And also in your presentation, you do mention the concept that is very, important when we talk about witchcraft and also motherhood, especially motherhood. So that is what we call the halo of motherhood. The halo of motherhood is that a married woman should be able to go through the natural process or the biological process of giving birth to a child. And until that time, until a woman is able to reproduce herself. So when she had when she has the halo, of motherhood is when she's pregnant and she's successfully able to deliver. So until that time, a married woman is considered less of herself and also less of a woman because that halo has not really, shown on her. So you mentioned that, and you talk about that halo of motherhood, and and connect that to lack of womb. So the infertility. So when a woman is fertile, and she's not able to conceive, and between of these, these two terms are witchcraft and barrenness. So we are trying to juxtapose the fact that a woman who is unable to conceive naturally will be considered, a witch in the sense that she has not really been able to be a mother. So, and towards the end of your presentation, you delineated, or probably you are able to complicate the notion of motherhood or being a mother in a sense by the terms Onwo and Ombi. So Ombi, which will suggest the natural process of a woman going through pregnancy and delivering a child, and Onwo, which talks about nurturing. So both concepts, both terms are very synonymous, and they are very integral to the cognomen of witches. When in the study of witchcraft, so as a witchcraft scholar, so you understand the concept of Onwo and Ombi, so which are not always accorded or in a way which are not always part of the ways people see witchcraft or witches. So witches are seen in negative and stereotypical lights, but in real sense, so in the cultural sense of framing witchcraft, beyond the social concepts that is maliciously informed by Westernization, Christianization, and Islamization. So witchcraft is not necessarily a power that carries negatives within the cultural, paradigm. So, and you talk about the contradiction here. The contradiction is the fact that even though witchcraft is framed as a negative power to have, but in the movies you've analyzed, so it's the same set of women that were considered witches who were instrumental to the successes of their husbands. I mean, the same man in this instance, Arolake, who elopes with Saro, helps him to become famous by granting him the power that she steals from the Akala board. The same way, Awarun, always considered a man-hater, is responsible for in the economic, the economic empire that will later make Saro a popular person. So even though these two women in your analysis, even though the film kind of talks about them more as, witches still, so they have fundamental positive contributions to the life of the. So it is in this instance that, you are able to, tell your audience that witchcraft, even though it's frowned at, but suggests a power to hold and a power to desire. So thank you so much for your presentation. So quickly, before I open this up for, I think we have an hour and a half. So we've spent only 44 minutes. So what I would like to do is talk for the next 5 minutes and then open this up for discussion. So just to kind of expand more on the goals of this panel. So by thinking through what we call the representations of women in Nollywood films, and what we're thinking through here is how is gender represented, especially. So are these texts gendered? So our Nollywood films as text, are they gendered in a way? So are there dichotomies in the ways that women are framed and the ways men are being framed? And also, when we think through their sexuality, I mean women's sexuality here. So what is the representation, what is the format for representing women? So the representational format, we are interested also in that, in women's sexuality, and also in agency. Agency is the power to act on oneself. We are looking at agency here. So these three terms, agency, sexuality, and also the notion of, identity. So the gendered identity. So how are these three concepts? How are they always, represented or framed in many Nollywood films? So in that term, so I said in critical terms, Nollywood framing of women has received substantial scholarly attention from scholars like Ogunleye 2004, film critics such as Harrow 1997, and cultural studies scholars including Giwa 2013. These individuals make scholarship attempts to unearth, and they make scholarly attempts rather to unearth, relocate, underscore many issues combating women across class margins, temporal and spatial dimensions, religious practices, social institutions, and cultural milieux. While many of these scholars focus on women in general, a few focus directly on women's representations in popular culture and film. For example, Noah Scar's 2015 book provides valuable commentaries on women celebrities and thespians in the Nigerian film industry. His work traces, and I quote, the development of Nollywood stardom across a variety of platforms, end of quote, and how the industry has managed to address many tensions of apparent cultural heterogeneity through the adaptable star system. It is the first book to appropriate the creative energy of a few contemporary Nigerian actresses and theorize their celebrity status as a form of marketing for the Nollywood industry. Now, just to not to bother us with many extensive quotations, Bokola 2020 reminds our readers about the ubiquity of Nollywood films and their ability to represent women more powerfully than other audiovisual formats. She claims, and I quote, Nollywood has expanded its artistic relevance and credibility, thus enhancing its capacity to shape attitudes towards women. Hence, Nollywood has far more power than its predecessors to intensify negative portrayal of women, end of quote. So, the question to ask is this. In all of these representations, in all of these framing of women, So can we argue that the counter-narrative perspective that delegitimizes patriarchy and hegemonic portrayal of women exists in Nollywood? So I turn to Adiduton 2020, who underscores the gender trope in Kelani's narrow part. In the article, Road Called Vagina, African Women Detour of Tunde Kelani's narrow part, where he argues that there are a few sexual imageries and gender empowerment moments in Nollywood films that repurposes Kelani as an adolescentric author who frames women as bold, audacious, and independent. This claim is based on the work of Giwa Isekije, 2013, who identifies specific feminist parameters in Kelani's films that set him apart from other male Nollywood filmmakers. In the article, Giwa articulates a series of representational logic and gender ideologies that Kelani inserts in his films to claim space for women, which dismantles patriarchy and deconstructs hegemonic toxic masculinity. So what I want to do here is to talk about the sexualization and objectification of women in Nollywood films that reflects the status of women in contemporary African society by introducing what I call the male gaze. The male gaze, which is a concept that is popularized by Laura Murphy in 1975, a British film critic and filmmaker and scholar, who traditionally writes that the male gaze writes women as exhibitions that, I quote, are simultaneously looked at and displayed with their appearances coded for strong visual and erotic impact so that they can be said to connote to be looked atness, end of quote. In the article, Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, Murphy examines the subtle sexualization of women in Hollywood films. She argues that established Hollywood filmmakers respond to a deep-seated bias in their portrayals of women, since most popular Hollywood films are cinematically composed to satisfy male voyeurism. She claims that Hollywood monopolizes women in cinema by turning them into a spectacle, of which the man is the, quote, bearer of the look. Furthermore, she posits that Hollywood films perpetuate the over-sexualization of women's bodies and that they are direct, explicit engagement with women's sexuality. While it brings erotic and sexual satisfaction to male voyeurs, the pleasure of looking at a female body undoubtedly emasculates women, especially when consent is not sought, not given. Ironically, the male gaze has become so pervasive nowadays that it has become normalized after a lifetime of seeing women sexualized in television, advertisements, and musical videos, especially in the hip-hop genre. So, as a Western rhetorical tool for film analysis, the male gaze can be extended beyond the bodily sexualization of women in Western cinema to include borrowing it as a frame for studying the portrayal of women in Nollywood films. In this regard, I contextualize the male gaze as a paternalistic, overbearing, and very oppressive masculine domination that delineates the limit of power that female protagonists can have and display. The male gaze delegitimizes women's agency and renders them as creation of men. Even in literature and popular culture, to this extent, Soyinka Ajayi Folabo avers that, I quote, woman of the male creative device usually exists as a projection of the author's conception of his ideal woman, end of quote. In that regard, the ideal woman is domesticated, subjugated, and controlled. In other words, a male figure constantly relegates the existence, movement, and achievement of the ideal woman. So, to talk about this more poignantly in this presentation, the male gaze delineates the scope of authority women can or aspire to possess. Thus, women seeking political positions are often perceived as transgressive bodies. Most women who venture into that arena of power are considered trespassing or too ambitious. Ironically, many times, they are framed as incapable of carrying tangible power, be it political, cultural, or economic power. So, to that end, while the male politicians are treated with dignity and respect, or even while a man who carries power is treated with dignity and respect, women are often framed as ineptitude, weak, and unable to carry tangible power when given the opportunity or when the opportunity arises. So the tendency to masculinize power is rife in the framing of women in Nollywood films. And to talk about this quickly, I want to show us what it means to talk about power and how to delineate the corridors of power and how Nollywood, unconsciously frames women as, unfit to carry power, unfit in a way, or probably naturally unable to carry power and to be able to also extend, power beyond immediate emotional reactions. So by so doing, I really want to work also on the same author that Dr. Oriola mentioned. So let's take a look at the movies of Kunle Afolayan. So Anikulapo and Ijogbon. So what I'm trying to show here is a connection, it's an extension of the idea of gender is the idea that sometimes Nollywood films are gendered test. Even when the authors, when the filmmakers don't really want to say that they are gendered, in the sense that you can see the differences in ways that these protagonists are framed in their movies. So why Dr. Oriola talks about barrenness and witchcraft, so an extension or probably another area to look at is the domain of power. Can women carry power in Nollywood films? Are women also framed, portrayed positively as individuals that can carry power? So to juxtapose this, let's just, if possible, if I'm able to, I want to share just a few minutes of scenes from Anikulapo and the movie Ijogbon by the same film producer, by the same author, or by the same filmmaker, Kunle Afolayan. Hopefully this time around, I'll be able to share this. So now, can you see my screen?
Yes.
The dominant here is the natural resources to be, that's supposed to be a source of blessing, will also be a source of chaos and violence in any African society because of mismanagement. But at the heart of this, you have three young people, two male figures and one powerful one figure. So this defines their offense. So, and in the end, we are talking about the management of these resources diamond. So this is a concluding part of that of the movie, whereby the three friends trying to solve the problems, and the honor lies by the woman who is giving the mark of diamond to do justice to that one substance that can liberate them. But let's see how Afolayan ends that particular, movie. So let's see the end of the sequence. We are constantly given to the woman and what she does with that power. Okay, so this is one iteration of that kind of representation. In this instance, Obi, is given the opportunity to hold the diamond, and there are other, choices she could have made with the diamond, but instead, she, decided to throw the stones into the river, as a way of ending the feud between friends. So I will pause on that. Now, let's take a look at another, another from the same in this case, let's take a look at Arolake and Nicola. Oh, sorry about that. So it's Netflix is giving me error. So okay. So my point is this shows that that in a way there is representational bias. Let's talking about it's always maybe not always like but the idea that Hollywood films are gender test and that the ways they portray women calls for more scholarship attention, especially in the new Nollywood films. Yeah, Arolake in an attempt to emancipate herself and also to retaliate. So when she chances upon the power of sorrow, instead of keeping it to herself and becoming the next Ajuku, she did not do that. Instead, she decided to empty the content of the girl so that Saru will not be able to perform, won't have the ability to raise the dead anymore. So in this instance, you can see a kind of correlation. So you can see a kind of pattern between the ways in which Kunle Afolayan frames women and the amount of power, the space of power that it relates to them. So so Arolake has the opportunity to use power for herself and to become more powerful, but she's framed as weak, inaptitude, and unable to carry that amount of power. So instead, she empties the content instead of giving the power for her own uses. Similarly, in Idiomo, Obi decided to throw the stones into the river instead of keeping these stones and arbitrate, to bring peace between the two friends. So when you look at this kind of framing, so you want to agree with us that Nollywood is gendered and their subtle, and their subtle portrayal of women that requires more scrutiny before one can realize that movies, especially that are made and made filmmakers, tend to remove power from women and place them, within a precarity that are universally accepted as a way of presenting men in our and try to open this up. If you have questions, if you have suggestions, we have about 30 more minutes to do that. So we welcome your questions. Thank you. Can you hear us? Because I heard that there's no audio, but that is not from my side here. So my audience is working fine.
Speaking, can hear me.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. So I said that we open the panel for discussion. If you have questions, please feel free to ask us questions. If you have suggestions, feel free to talk more about topics today, especially on the ideas of marionettes and witchcraft that Professor Riola talked about. But really, I'm having a hard time here from the side. So there's going to be an echo coming from that side, and the audio is far away.
It's what that's in this session.
Yes, you can. You might be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask that why it's only centered on women as witches or witchcraft and prostitution. I don't know piece of men being maltreated because they are also involved in the area of winter. Is it criminal base that they are the ones who suffer such implications in Nigeria or in the West?
Sorry, sir, please, they are being
So if you can hear us, let's say, please repeat the last question. We didn't hear it.
Okay. Okay, I'm trying to ask a question, coming from the gender perspective, because all discussions about this kind of thing is always coming from other side, the female gender having the upper hand in the attacks, of issue of witchcraft. So I'm asking, are there no cases where men also suffer such attacks, by society or committing such issues, such problems? If the person goes with that, so to speak. Because I look at it from a balanced attack that maybe there are times men also pass or pass so it's only coming from the side of the women. So is there any case that we can address that a man somewhere must have passed through that such a scenario?
Yeah, so
It's for the
yes, I just want to understand the question better. So you're saying that are there instances when males are accused of being witches? Is that a question?
I said, I don't get it. Please, can you come again? Don't be too strict. Can you come again, please? I didn't get you.
I said, are you asking if there are instances where men have been accused of being witches?
Exactly, yes. So can you give us no, it mean me.
Men.
I said, I don't know. I mean, why trying to discuss? I mean, the presenter. I said, did she look at it if there are cases of men being involved in such wizardry cases in anywhere? Is there any report so that you can have a bit of a balanced judgment? If you say, although there are no cases, you can say, okay, that nobody has seen any case like that. But only for focusing on the women, that they are the ones who have always had such cases. It's always the problem. I have seen something that has happened in my own place, that a man was accused of, taking his children, using them to renew his life. That is also part of wizardry, but those things are not always, open to the society. It's always when a woman suffers that fate that people, hear about such incidences. So what I'm saying is, it will be also right to also make some references. Where there are none, you cannot say, okay, that none was found. So that's why we are trying to discuss what is available. That's my take, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Do you know that the Alaafin of Oyo, who was portrayed in the movie Anikulapo, in the Yoruba concept, the Alaafin of Oyo himself is supposed to be a witch or maybe a wizard, an elevated position of witchcraft. The Alaafin of Oyo is celebrated as Ikuba Bayeye and is referred to as Iku himself, which means that no matter how powerful you are, once you get to the palace of Alaafin of Oyo, naturally you hang your power, even if you have a desire to kill the Alaafin of Oyo, or if you have a power of destruction, you cannot harm the Alaafin of Oyo because he is celebrated, eulogized as death himself. And to be death is to be connected to the cosmos, to show that Alaafin of Oyo himself is a witch. But nobody all through the movie ever referred to him as a witch. And if you look at the second sequel of the movie, that's The Rise of the Spectre, the scene where the Igyose was shown, you would see that there were men in the Igyose when Arolake was to do some trust for the witches. You will see that there were some men that the men were helping him to put some things in his bowl, but nobody in the society ever referred to any man as a witch. So it seems to me that witchcraft is a metaphor. Now, this session is titled Gendered Identities, to show that if there are male or if there are men who are witches, the African Yoruba society would not refer to them as witches, not because they don't know that they are powerful or they are negative, but because there is already a concept, there is already an identity in the mind of the people that shows that only the women are bad, that shows that only the women could suck blood. And the Ajilaya tradition of witchcraft, where you see women dancing, where you see the representation of Ajedudu and Ajepupa, usually you only find a wizard there, and the wizard will be there drumming, and the wizard would not contribute to anything. And of course, when you wake up, you would never see anybody refer to the man as a witch. If you've seen any of the movies of Ajilaya, you will see somebody saying, "Yeah, Miaje." Nobody has ever said Baba Miaje. But you will know that there are witches. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. Witches in the contemporary society from maybe some Akoko society, Akoko Ogbagi. When you eulogize them, you eulogize them as Aje. There is a community in Ekiti State, they eulogize them as Eleyeshe Weye Weye. It means that they are witches, and when they talk, they chant with wisdom. And for Ogbagi and Irun, they are eulogized as witches. Like it's a tradition to be witches, and they are wise, they are knowledgeable, they foresee. But no man in Irun and Koko has ever been referred to as witches, despite the fact that it is, according to the lineage, that every child in the lineage is a witch, but no man has been referred to as witch. So also as depicted in the data. Despite the fact that Alaafin of Oyo himself is supposed to be referred to as a witch, nobody ever referred to him as a witch, to show that there is a sense, there is a mindset in the African Yoruba society that once a woman is not given birth, automatically the woman has done something to her own children, or maybe she has eaten the children. So it's a gendered ideology, it's a gendered perspective that is entrenched in the African society. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Oriola, for your wonderful explanation. So, as an addition to that, what we do, so the panel is about gender identities. So, we're talking about, so it's in the title. So, the title focuses more on women. So, it is not a comparative analysis of men and women. So, on one hand, on the other hand, let's talk about the concept of wizard and witchcraft. These are not, they are not, what do you call it? They are not opposites. So wizardry is not the opposite of witchcraft. And it's important that African cultural studies scholars understand that fact. So wizardry is not an equal, of witchcraft. So you cannot equate wizardry and witchcraft to make the same thing. So wizardry has to do more with charm making, the ability to out physical manifestations of power, which include ability elements. So more within a physical way of knowing witchcraft. We are using the word witchcraft loosely, especially within the Yoruba domain of talking about that concept. Witchcraft has to do more with what we call vital force. The fact that it's located in women and not in men. So it's part of their biological composition. And it's part of their biological composition because they are the only ones who do menstruation. Men don't menstruate. So if you don't menstruate, you can't be a witch. Because menstruation is not just a biological and natural, monthly shedding of blood. And you're about, understanding of power. So it is connected with something more specific. And that is why when people talk about wizardry and witchcraft, the wizard is the opposite of witch. No, not the same thing. So witchcraft is standardly enshrined in Yoruba power in the universe. It's given a specific position, and it alludes to the power that women, carry that is in them. So it's a power of procreation, it's a power of self-defense, and it's also a power that is naturally given to them. Why? If you can trace that power back to Ifa corpus in Shetura, the Udu or Shetura corpus. So the power was given to marry. Primordial power was given to women to defend themselves and also to defend, the universe. So we are not looking for that. We are not looking for instant in this. What we are looking for is the idea that talks about women agency, and one of such misrepresentation is always the fact that a barren woman rather is considered a witch because she must have sacrificed in vitro. The idea that a woman can sacrifice the fetus in her in vitro in her home because always that's discourse about sacrifices and consumption of human flesh. So wizardry is not the same thing as witchcraft. Thank you. So we can take 2 more questions. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
To Dr. Titilope Riola, thank you so much for that presentation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for taking us back to those 2 movies. I happen to have watched them too. My observation, or let me say contribution, is to the issue of can we also say that barrenness is has an empowering quality as well? I say empowering quality in the sense that Moirolake, even though she was termed a witch because she was unable to give birth, had to prove herself in another aspect by becoming very rich and even turning to a philanthropist in the old town, and she had started giving people money, empowering them. So, and you know, there was a scene in the movie where there is one young man that wanted to marry Rolake, and Rolake was telling that person that, no, I don't want to marry again because I know that I cannot give birth. I just want to be rich, and you know. So I'm just talking of, can we also say there is an empowering quality to being barren in the case of Rolake now? I mean, I'm not saying generally.
Hello, Ma. Yes, I think I agree with you.
Yes.
If you know the Ifa cosmos well, you remember the story of Oshun. Oshun was also a barren woman. And then she became a goddess. And then her role was to give barren women children. How does that situate? Like, how can you situate that? It means there is something in nature that naturally endows barren women. And that was what Kunle Afolayan shows or depicts in his movie. Because the first sequel, it was just an ordinary girl who didn't know so much. Then people were pointing fingers at her as a witch. But she was not a witch, and then she rebuffed it. But it was as if nature was promoting her. She would see young children, she would see children in the palace, and then they would help her with her beads. She would be happy. She would make beads, then she would give it to children. She would give it to the Oba's children. And then she would relate well with them and smile. Then the second sequel showed that she was just sleeping, and nature just found out worthy of that quality. So it is a Yoruba thing. Even in the Ifa cosmos, the women are celebrated. If you look at the story very well, you would notice that Aye itself was portrayed as a woman in the Ifa mythology to show that there is something about women that is celebrated or that is supposed to be celebrated in the Yoruba society. Well, it is as if some patriarchal, some male-centric characters actually intentionally want to double this. They want to come up with their own ideology to say that women are not important, to say that women are not supposed to be celebrated. But if you look at, okay, there is a particular leaf that is used for multiple healing, and that leaf is called Ewe Iyalode. Why would it not be called Ewe Babalode? To show that women actually have a power, or they can control things in the cosmos. And no matter how much people do not believe it, if you go to that leaf and then you call it, Iyalode means a powerful woman. Iyalode is, in the market, you have Iyaloja and you have Iyalode. Iyalode is close to the king. She helps the king to look at other women or to control other women in the society, to show that, and Iyalode is an astute woman who knows or who understands other women well. So once you call that particular leaf, that leaf is Ewe Lapa, that's a common leaf. But once you call it astute woman, the leaf works for you. You can use it when somebody shoots you. You can use it to remove a gunshot. You can use it if somebody, you see, this things actually work in the African concept, or you just feel these things are not real, you don't need to add anything to it. Just call it the leave of an astute woman, then it works for you. And there are so many other things that work. So it's as if nature has the power of promoting women because the society has already pointed them, or the society has already labeled them as evil and as bad. If you look at this movie by Tonya Imaku, Malaika, Malaika is a story of a barren woman who, of course, people don't like her because of her character. And then she became very wicked. She would get angry because nobody regards her, nobody celebrates her. Then she was almost always angry. And then when she went to she went to a place to divine, and then they said she was the witch, or they said she was always getting angry. It is because of maybe of our unhappiness, because the society was labeling her and repressing her. And so naturally she became hardened and evil. Then you see at some point, okay, then despite the fact that she was not happy, the child of the husband, that's the stepdaughter, was kidnapped. She was the one that helped the child to be freed. She did all she could. And people were surprised that this seemingly wicked woman could do all of this to free this child. Of course, that's the Nollywood tradition. But let's come back to the society. The seeming barren women are humane, they are kind. And when you look at the Yoruba story, when you look at the story of the Igbos, you would notice that these women actually have something to contribute to the society, despite the fact that the society doesn't respect them. Because of this, nature itself empowers them. As much as you want to say it is not true, but if you look at their stories, well, there is this belief in the Yoruba that if you want to be a powerful woman, don't have sex for so long. Then naturally you just become really powerful. So it is to me as if you want to be powerful, just let people abuse you. Then you grow naturally to be useful to nature. I don't know if that explains anything. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Tiana. Thank you, Dr. Leona. Thank you for that question. So we have about 5 minutes left. So we can still take a question. So in the remaining time. So if you have any question or any contribution, feel free to do so. For the audience, so the concept of awareness, and you think of witchcraft, and you think more about the all power, schema. So culturally speaking, so the universe, the Yoruba universe, so the African cultural universe, so is always about this imbalance. And because there are more women in our universe than men, so there is always the tendency to think about what it means to be barren, what it means not to be barren. So barrenness in one instance is an ideology, in another, so it's always about an attitude. So it's an ideology, it's a social construct, because when you think of the concept of O and OB, so and that speaks to the meaning that is barrenness positive in the sense that is able to afford other social responsibilities. And people help them to stop their own businesses. So in that instance, barrenness is justified, as a social construct, whereby a barren woman is still able to function and articulate our roles in a society. And when you think more of women of power in the past, you think more of the idea of celibacy. So celibacy as the understanding of not going into marriage. So celibacy has something to do more with spiritual power. If you want to accelerate your spirituality, you want to attain a holy position, so within the sacred pantheon. So you reduce your sexuality in the sense that so, and that would be the sense that barrenness connotes in this instance that even Caroline is unable to give birth to a child, still she's a mother in the sense that she nurtures other people's children. So that's the concept of OB and OB. So the one that gives birth and the one that nurtures. So we want to thank you all for attending our conference. Our panel rather. So thank you for coming to this panel. We appreciate you, and thank you for those who asked us questions. Thank you for listening. I would say enjoy the rest of the conference, and hopefully I would see you next year. So we come out with another panel, so on Nollywood films. All right, Dr. Odiola, thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said, sir.
Yeah, do you have anything to tell the audience before we close the panel?
I just want to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
All right, so everyone, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye.